Hello, it's Rhonda with Blessed in the Mess. Today, I wanted to talk to you about something that I experienced and give you a little insight of another tactic that the enemy will use in a relationship with a narcissist, and that is isolation. They want to get you isolated. They want to pull you away from your relationships with your family, your friends, and ultimately it's so that they can have control over you. And so with my experience, I've had a lot of time to look back and reflect over my relationship, because when you're in the middle of the mess, it's very confusing, and you yourself will do a lot of things to just try to cope and deal with it. And denial is part of that, and trying to excuse their behavior, not really knowing how evil and toxic it really is, because you just haven't maybe been in the relationship long enough to discern it or to figure it out. It took me years to figure out what I was dealing with. But when you're done and you can look back, you can see it for what it was, and you can see how all the pieces finally fit. And so in the middle of it, I didn't really realize how much he was isolating me away from my friends, away from my family even, and away from church, and just all things that I enjoyed. And so, looking back on it, I now see it that it was just another one of those tactics that was used for him to gain control and power over me. I was, when we first got together, I was going to church regularly. I was in ministry, working with teenage girls and loving it. And after I got involved with him, I gave up all of that and wasn't going to church as regularly. And one thing that I realized was that after we got married, when I left him alone, like if I did go do these things, and this is how it happened, if I did go to like something without him, when I would come back, he'd be drunk. Even if he had been sober for, a couple of weeks or a month or something, it was like he would get upset that I had a life outside of our home. And that was his way of controlling me. And it got to the point where, it was painful when you would come home and he'd be drunk. We'd start a whole nother cycle, which usually took, anywhere from 4 days to a week or more to deal with. He needed constant babysitting is what he needed. And so because he used his alcohol as a tactic to control me in that way, I gave up a lot of stuff. I gave up really just any kind of desire to do anything for myself, especially outside of the home, because I was going to pay for it. I was going to pay for it if I did. And there was a time before he went and got treatment, I had finally, I was in the middle of it, didn't really know it was a narcissistic tactic. I knew he was trying to control me. It was very obvious that he didn't ever want me to be without him. But there came a time that I just got so overwhelmed with it and so tired of it. And he was coming off of a binge, and he had sobered up a little bit for, a day or so. And I was just so tired of not being able to go to the gym. I couldn't go to the gym and work out without him. And I knew if I could just do some exercise, I would feel better. So I finally just said, you know what? I'm going to go for a walk, and I'm going to leave the baby with you. And he was probably about 15 months at the time. And I was like, I'm just going to go for a walk. He's not going to leave the house. He's sobering up. The baby's probably safe. I never left the baby with him. ever. This was going to be the first time, in 15 months that I was going to go somewhere, which was really just in the neighborhood, to go around the block. I was going to go somewhere without him. And I was going to make him be responsible for the baby, because I need to start taking care of myself. I need to just go for a walk. I'm going to start walking regularly and try to gain some of my life back. And I trusted that the baby would be fine. And so I'm walking around the neighborhood, and he knows the route that I walk. We used to stroll the baby the same circle, the whole, for a long time. He knew. And I was coming back down my street, and he comes into the neighborhood on 2 wheels in the car, flying towards the house. And I'm like, what is he doing? Why did he leave the house? Why is he on 2 wheels? Why is he going 50 miles an hour in the neighborhood? Well, I start running to the house because I'm wondering if the baby's in the car with him driving reckless, or did he leave the baby home alone? And so I ran as fast as I could, which wasn't easy to do. I ran to the house to see if he got the baby out of the car, and he did. And I was blown away. I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you driving through the neighborhood like this? He goes, well, I was looking for you. I said, if you were looking for me, why'd you leave the neighborhood? And he came in, stumbled to the sofa, and passed out. And he literally drove the baby to go buy alcohol. And it was just one more attempt to control my life and to stop me from having any freedom, doing anything good for me. He used that alcohol all the time to manipulate me. It was overwhelming. So that particular time was the worst. That was the worst episode of him drinking, because he was driving the baby and he was reckless. And I was so ready to harm him, if you will. I didn't know if I was gonna be able to control myself. I was so mad. I called my mom and I said, Mom, if you do not get over it, and I've never called my mom before, ever, about him. I mean, she found out things about him in conversation, but I had never reached out to her before. And I called her and I said, if you do not get over here and get this man out of my house, you're gonna visit me in jail. That's how mad I was. And she and my dad came and got him and took him and drove him around for a little bit while he pretended to be on the phone with someone, and he had my parents drop him off at a store close by the house, telling them that a friend was gonna come pick him up. And of course, all he did was walk back home. But I was so furious. I was so furious that I knew it was over. I knew I could not do it anymore. I told him, I said, this is your last time. You drink one more time and we're done. And he stayed sober that was probably July, and he stayed sober till October. And the next time he drank, that was it. He went to the Home of Grace on November the 2nd, because that was it. This next time he drank, we're done. I'm spending money either to get you help, I will pay for you to go get help, or for my son, because I was done, but for our son, so that he can have a sober dad, I will pay for you to go get help, or I'm paying for a divorce. I'm doing one of the two, but this is done. You can't be trusted. I need my life back. I need some kind of help. I can't live like this anymore. I'm done. And so looking back over it, I see all the ways that he tried to control my life and isolate me, just keep me from going anywhere. And how sick it was that he used alcohol so often to control me. All the time. I mean, it happened all the time. He would get mad about something, or he wouldn't get his way, or he would feel slighted, or this, that, and the other, and he'd just go get drunk because he knew it hurt. He knew he could gain control with alcohol. And that cycle and that sickness started, almost 20 years ago. long before I showed up in the process. I mean, he admitted that he did use alcohol to control people. He admitted it. I mean, it wasn't, me just coming up with it. He did eventually admit that, it was his way of gaining control. And the enemy will use whatever means possible to destroy people. And that's just a different and sick way that the enemy uses alcohol. Not only to destroy the person who's drinking it, but to use it to destroy the people around them who care about them. And that was just one. That was probably the worst episode. When he came in that neighborhood, oh my gosh, literally on two wheels. You could hear him screeching when he took a turn into the neighborhood. I was running for my life because I had to know if my kid was in the car. I wasn't gonna let him lie to me about it if I didn't get there in time. But what he was gonna probably do, because this was the way that he did things, was he was probably going to come inside and pass out and act like he never left. He was gonna act like he never left the house. He did that all the time. He would wake up early in the morning, early, 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and walk to the store if he couldn't drive. If I had his keys, or there was a season when he couldn't drive, and he'd walk to the store and get back home and act like he never left. And I knew he left, and his addiction was very bizarre. It was very bizarre. Not your normal alcoholic. Not anything like I've ever seen before or even heard of. But that's just another way that the enemy will have these people try to control you. It's just very sick. And they will isolate you. They want you to themselves. They do not want to share you. At one point I was going to recovery class. Our church had a recovery class. And a couple of times he did go with me, but I was going by myself, and it was for addicts, but they allowed me to come. So I was reaching out, doing all that I could, and I would go without him, come home, and he'd be drunk. He just didn't want me having a life. And in the end, it got worse. He micromanaged my life. I mean, he didn't tell me what I was gonna do. He would just make plans, and I was to obey them, and that's for another day. That was a whole nother thing we dealt with in the end. But they will isolate you as best they can, and you will feel isolated, lonely, like you are doing this all by yourself, and it can become extremely overwhelming. And this is why you need a support system. If somebody can't let you have a support system, you need to get out of that relationship. I'm sorry. If it's that controlling, especially if you're not married, this is a huge red flag. It's time to get out. If you can't have friends, and you can't go do things, and you can't have a life, that is a red flag. That is a check yourself real quick and get out of there if you can. So just another tactic that they use, isolate you. I hope that's helpful. I hope you're not experiencing it. But educate yourself. Educate yourself, guys. If you are struggling with a toxic relationship and you can't figure it out and pieces aren't fitting, start researching their behavior. Start researching their, what they're doing. And you may come up with finding out that they have a personality disorder. And once you know what you're dealing with, you can work towards fixing it. Fixing yourself by getting out of the situation, confronting them, and seeing if they're open to, just getting some help. But when you're starting to go through all of these things and you don't know what it is, you just assume, oh, this is just how they are. This is just their personality, which was my excuse for years. Oh, this is just how he is. He's just, this kind of person. But the behaviors were so toxic, and they were accumulating. And so when I started finally Googling what he was doing, That's when it all made sense. So do your homework. Knowledge is power, and it's going to take that to get out of it and stay out of it. So hope that's helpful. In the meantime, stay blessed in your mess. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.